We've all been there at some point or another where we order the perfect curriculum, or so we think. It's the perfect curriculum, it's gonna work and be great, and then all of a sudden, several weeks or several months into using said curriculum, we realize this is not working for us. If you've been there, you are not alone. I guarantee you probably every single homeschool mom has been there at one point or another, and if they have not, they will be. So it happens. We choose curriculum that we think will work, but they just, for one reason or another, does not work. So today I'm going to share some curriculum choices that we have used not just this year. In fact, I'm not including anything we've used this year. This is stuff we've used in years past, specifically for my very first year of homeschooling. I have been homeschooling this is our 5th year. So when my oldest, who's now in 5th grade, when she was in 1st grade, yes, I have kept all of the curriculum because no, I'm not a hoarder, but yes, I do like to keep my children's curriculum. So I went back over the years, what was something that just we all, either I really had like strong feelings about, or my children, we all, it was mutual. Me and my kids just didn't really like it. So these are some things that just did not work for us. Now, I don't want this to just be, these are terrible and look at the reasons why. I want this to be a little bit constructive. So I am going to go through and say, like, with each one that I'm showing, what I would have either done different, or if someone were to say, hey, I'm using this, what would you have done differently? You can take my advice or not. Obviously it's way 100% up to you. It's just things that looking back, if I could do it over, if I would do the curriculum over, I would do differently to make it a better fit. And again, take all of this with a grain of salt. If this is curriculum that you like and love and has worked in the past for you, or you're currently using it now, just disregard whatever I'm saying. Like, this is just our opinions and why it hasn't worked for us. So with all that, let me get started right into the video. First, we have Writing with Purpose. This is penmanship and creative writing from Abeka, level 3 or grade 3. And it includes cursive for about the first half of the year, journaling, imagination, and truth. So more creative writing and just formal writing. The reason we didn't really love it is just because the amount of writing that it required every single day to do. And some of the passages were pretty long. And so my daughter went from using the Good and the Beautiful, where their writing is a little bit more gentler, to this, and it was just a lot. So yeah, some of the passages just get pretty in depth, and her hand would be so tired by the end of this. And so what I would change about this is if I were doing this again, and I just didn't know, you live and you learn. I would have her do maybe the trace and write and choose just one of these every single day, whatever one she chose, just because the amount of work was just too much for her. It may not be for some people, but for her, it was a lot. So that was their penmanship. She didn't love it. She went from loving cursive in 1st grade or 2nd grade to absolutely like hating it by 3rd grade. She was just burnt out. It was just too much. So if you use this and you have someone who's not loving it, I would recommend just cutting back a little bit. Okay. And then the second thing it includes, so once the first half of the year is over, where they finish their writing practice, their cursive practice, is where they are writing more formally. So this is like an animal report. They have book reports and things like that. And then they just have blank pages for like journaling and things like that, creative writing. So what I didn't love about this, and she was only in 3rd grade, so I wasn't super concerned, but they just didn't give enough writing instruction for the parent and teacher. And they definitely didn't give anything to like compare it to of what it should look like. So yes, they did things like word webs, and they gave general instruction. It just wasn't for me, it just wasn't quite enough for my end as the teacher, and just what to teach her exactly at this age. Like, how much should I teach her? How in depth should I go? What should I be required of her? And how harshly should I grade her? Like, it just didn't really give any of that. And so I found it to be lacking in that area. So again, it was third grade. I wasn't super concerned. I mean, there is a good amount of writing, I will say that. I just wish it had given more clear and concise instruction. So if I were to use this again, or to tell somebody who is going to be using this, just kind of go into it with that, knowing that there's not going to be a whole lot in there. And so just keep that in mind. So this one actually comes from our very first year of homeschooling. This was when my daughter was in first grade. I was so overwhelmed. I had no idea what to choose. I was just like, oh my goodness, how does somebody choose? What is out there? And I knew I had done abeka my whole life, and I was like, I'm not doing abeka. I'm done with that. Ironically, if you're new here, I use abeka a lot. But anyway, so I use this is easy peasy all-in-one homeschool. This is primarily an online curriculum, and it is really awesome. It is created by a homeschool mom. She has a really great heart, and it's free. This is a free curriculum, so you can do it online. They have from preschool to high school math and reading and literature and you name it, history, science, it's all online for free. But you do have the options for some of their curriculum to get the printed version. So I said, let's do that. And again, I had no idea really what I was doing. Hold on, let me adjust my camera. Okay, so here I have the language arts book, and then here comes the reader. Now, she does say on her website that she recommends no formal reading till age 8 or something along those lines. I would say that probably some people are waiting that long, but most people are not waiting till age 8 to introduce formal reading and anything formal. I would say they're probably, just because state regulations require a little bit younger. So keep that in mind, especially when you get to the reader. So you have pronouns, spelling, punctuation, capitalization, nouns, plurals, and more. So I know that a lot of curriculum does introduce nouns and that in first grade, which I'm not opposed to. I feel like, especially when they're still learning to read, I feel like the phonics really needs to be a big priority. And so you can see there's a little bit, 1 or 2 days, long O, long U. But you'll see throughout here the theme. There's not really, there is a variety of exercises. There's nothing really wrong with them, but there's not a whole lot of phonics going on here. And what is kind of only lightly touched on. So there's a little bit here, but it does do a lot of, here's a book report they're doing on day 22 of first grade. Yeah, now granted, it was a little bit easy, but I don't know. I don't need my first grader to be this is just me worrying about a book report at the beginning of the first 3 weeks of first grade, ordering sentences, a story writing. I mean, she did it. My first grader at that time, Larissa is my oldest, thankfully she was a strong reader, but I feel like she needed more of the phonics, just to be drilled in. She only had kindergarten for that. And so first grade, she didn't get too much of that. So that would be my biggest thing here. It's kind of all over the place. It's creative writing. It's book reports. It's all kinds of things. And for me, I think looking back, my focus should have been more fonts. I just didn't know. So if you're doing this, I would probably recommend making sure that you have some sort of, that you are practicing phonics and reading, and just making sure you're consistent with that. And then the reader, goodness gracious. Okay. So I did look online. They do have a pre-reader before this, and that's probably more appropriate for kindergarten, first grade. But there's a huge jump and I'll show a picture of some of the samples of the reader online, the one before this, but this is my first reader. So this was recommended for first grade. It does have cute little tales, the Tale of Jolly Robin, Beatrix Potter, McGuffey's reader, so it's all kind of classics. It was just a lot for first grade. So here is day 1. This is the instructions of what they want you to do. And then here, you're supposed to, the children are supposed to read this. Of course, there was a time once when Jolly Robin was just a nestling himself with 2 brothers and 1 sister, all of them like him, much spotted with black. He lived in a house on one of Farmer Green's apple trees. This was day one of reading. I will say my daughter was a really strong reader. So it's like a page and a half of reading. She was a really strong reader in kindergarten. She went to a Christian school. She was probably reading at like a 2nd grade level at the end of kindergarten, like very, very, very good reader. But even this was just like, the wording was over her head. She never knew what was going on. She did have good comprehensions. It wasn't that. This I think is a lot for a 1st grader, especially at the beginning of 1st grade. So I would not recommend this reader unless you have I don't know. Like I said, my daughter was a pretty strong reader, and still this was just a lot. This would be good as a read aloud, or we even took turns. Eventually I was just reading this to her and having her like, hey, what happened? And she was just lost with the wording. So there's better readers out there, I would say. Many like more age appropriate readers out there for kids, especially when they're young. You want them to be enjoying reading, looking forward to it. So I just don't know if this would be a good fit for probably most children. You never know. There may be somebody who loves this reader. I'd say most children, probably not so much. Next one, we had My Story in the World Around Me. This was, again, our 1st year of homeschooling. My daughter was in 1st grade. And this is from Masterbooks. And it's basically stories, like kind of like cultures from around the world and how it applies to our life. And we found some of the things pretty interesting, but for the most part, it just, again, wasn't really for us. So what it would do is start off with like an opening, and then there would be a talk about it time. So you would discuss, which is, fine. An activity time, a picture. Sometimes they colored. There was always a word search, and I don't know why when she was in 1st grade, this always intimidated her. She always hated this day. Like, oh, here's the word search. It was pretty hard for her. Helping hands. So what I didn't really love about this, and why I feel like our 1st year, we pretty much quit everything like 3/4 of the way through the year, which is, just goes to say, it's your 1st year, or you've felt like, oh my gosh, everything I chose was a failure. I've been there. My 1st year, I feel like, wow, none of this worked. So anyway, they have these words highlighted, and they're supposed to write them on like 3x5 cards. And at the end of the week, I guess, go through them and review them or write their definitions. Most of it was just like church. Like, why is she writing this? Is she not supposed to know what that is? I just didn't really get it. So I was just, again, I didn't know. I was just kind of making her go through the list and write these random highlighted words down. And she had like 20 of them a week. It was a lot. And I felt like a lot of the stories were a little bit disjointed. So let me go on a junk to China. So it'll be talking about that. And then it'll be kind of talking about like Chinese culture, but then it'll be talking about something random. Like they'll somehow randomly bring the Bible and Jesus in, and I guess try to connect the two. And then like these talk times and activities, a lot of times they had nothing to do with what was being taught. She did enjoy the pictures, but again, some of the activities and the crossword puzzle every week did get a little bit redundant. If I were to do this again, I definitely would not have her go through and like write all these things down. If she wanted to skip this, I would skip it. Again, I didn't really know. I thought you had to do everything exactly accordingly. And I would just kind of read through and talk about things and be a little bit more relaxed with it. I wouldn't be so like strict and rigid with it, because she eventually was like, she's not a complainer at all, but she was just like, oh, I don't really, by the time we would get to this, sometimes she'd be like, can we just skip this? And so I kind of knew, all right. And I wasn't enjoying it. Again, it just felt disjointed for us and kind of all over the place, just talking about random things that really didn't have anything to do with the main overall topic of what was trying to be discussed at the beginning of the chapter. So anyway, that's us. If I wouldn't do this again, but if I did, those are kind of things that I would tweak to make it a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more enjoyable. All right, and then lastly is math lessons for living education level 1. This is also from Masterbooks. This, surprise, surprise, was our very first year of homeschooling. I've actually never talked about this before that I've used this math, but okay, so let's just go through. There's 180 days worth of math. So how it is it opens up with these twins, Charlotte and Charlie. They're going to stay with their grandparents for the summer. And each lesson opens up with them having a discussion and kind of learning like a math principle. And then, so they do that at the beginning of the week. And then each day, day 2, they have exercises to do for the week. And then they're on to the next lesson. Okay, so you'll notice a theme here. And the theme is lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of copy work. This poor child probably wrote her alphabet or her numbers 1 to 10 100 times. It was ridiculous. They spend lots and lots and lots of times on shapes. They spend a whole lesson, a whole week on rectangles. So this was day 5. By day 5, they're still just counting or writing 1 to 9 and doing rectangles. And then circle, they spend a whole lesson on circles, a whole lesson on triangles. So you'll get the point. They say that this is a grade behind. So they will say they recommend this for kindergarten. The reason I got this is because they're like, well, if they don't know their tens, place value, then they need to start here. And I was nervous because, again, she had went to kindergarten at a Christian school, so I had no idea. It was my first year. I was like, I just want to make sure. So that's why I bought level 1. In hindsight, I would have gone to level 2. She totally could have. She went from abeka kindergarten, which is pretty on par or advanced math, to this. And I just feel like we kind of wasted a whole year. So you'll see, there's just nothing really happening this whole time except they're copying numbers and they're doing simple addition, like maybe up to 10. And they do learn their place value, I will say that. But other than that, I would say I was trying to think, like, how could I tweak this to make this better? There just isn't. I just would not recommend this. And I'm sure it's worked for other people. I'm sure it has. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep selling them. But I just don't personally. The other stuff, there was like at least redeeming qualities. The other curriculum I mentioned, I don't know. There's just so many other kindergarten or first grade curriculums out there that work well and that will actually be comprehensive. They did teach clocks and telling time. But again, she had learned that in kindergarten. Literally everything she had learned except place value in kindergarten. And I'm sure she even got some of that in kindergarten too. So they want you to do, and the other thing we didn't really love, they wanted you to practice these right-brained flashcards. So you made up a story, like instead of just writing 1 + 9 = 10, you had to like write a story and draw pictures. And we tried that for some of them, and like we would go over them and try to make it fun, and neither of us, she was just not into it. I was just not into it. This just didn't work. She was just like, let me know 1 + 9 = 10. So I get what they're trying to do. This didn't work. I don't know. So by the end of the year, they're really only knowing, I'll flip to the end. Again, color in the squares. Like, goodness gracious, how many times can a child make squares and rectangles and write their numbers 1 to 100? So that was pretty much it. This one just was a total flop for us. So again, that was just what didn't work for us. There was a few that my girls one girl didn't like this history, one girl didn't like this science, one didn't like this. So I wasn't going to throw in every single thing. This was just like what I personally found, probably like the biggest ones that I have found over the years. But I will say a lot of that, just to leave on a note of encouragement, if you're feeling like a little bit discouraged with your homeschool curriculum choices. Again, we've all been there, especially if you're very new to homeschool and you just feel like everything you got this year was a total bust. Like, as you could see, pretty much our first year was the same. But that doesn't mean you need to quit or give up. You know, find something that is going to work. Don't give up. Just continue to search until you find something that you think will be a little bit of a better fit for you. And even still, we still always come across those, you know, bumps in the roads, those hits and misses. But I think it will get easier as time progresses. If you're first year homeschooling and you were like, no, you're satisfied with everything, then that's awesome. Like, that's really, really cool. I'm really happy for you because that doesn't happen all the time. So anyway, just leaving with a note of encouragement, and you can just pick back up. If something doesn't work for you, there's no sense in putting it down and picking up with something else that will work a little bit better. If you did like this video, I would love if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe if you have not done so already. And if you are interested in more homeschool curriculum type content, I have all kinds of playlists down below so you can see flip throughs and reviews and comparisons and things like that. Thank you so much for watching and for lending me your time. I appreciate it. I know our time is valuable, so I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.